Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the relaunch of the Ask a Pro webinar series. Actually, first we're going to say thank you very much to the MIT Enterprise Forum of Cambridge and the MentorSmart program, which I am a co-founder of and co-chair with the amazing Craig Sanders. And thank you to Craig. Special thanks to Katya and Amy at the MIT Enterprise Forum office for their support in helping us to run this program. And many, many thanks to the mentees who back in our last launch gave us a long list of topics for webinars that you all would like to hear. This is the first one. It's actually a combination of two of those. You guys told us you wanted to know something about developing business plans and also pitching. That happens to be my core competence, so that's what we're combining the two of them. And that is what we mean by 4 steps to a pitchable plan. So my name is Linda Plano, and I have the best job in the world. I get to work with smart, creative, and passionate people just like you and help you make your dreams come true. And I've had the good fortune to coach nearly 600 mostly high-tech entrepreneurs, and they've gone on to raise well over $250 million. So I just love what I do, and the opportunity that provides for me to help entrepreneurs through programs like MentorSmart. When I was the Associate Director for the Mass Tech Transfer Center, I helped to run a dozen major investor pitch events and dozens of much smaller ones. All of this kind of fits together. Now, as an entrepreneur, you have no doubt been told one of two things among many. Either number one, oh, you absolutely have to write a business plan and it needs to be 25 to 35 pages, or you've been told nobody reads business plans anymore. I feel your pain. This is pretty much what your life is like as an entrepreneur. You will get contradictory advice all the time. It's part of the reason we have the MentorSmart program, so that you can get consistent advice, or at least be able to discuss the advice with very, very experienced and smart mentors. Nonetheless, it's something you're going to face all the time. So what's the truth? Well, unfortunately, like most of life, it's somewhere in between. If investors read a business plan for every single company that came to pitch to them, they would have no time to eat, let alone sleep, and they would probably all be jumping off of buildings out of the sheer frustration of reading all of that. So the point to writing a business plan is not so much as to have a document to hand to investors on an initial basis, but rather you must do the work. I don't care so much whether you make it look really pretty if you've got a great pitch, but I do care very much if you don't do the homework behind it. So what we're going to be talking about today is what's critical to know for a great pitch, and therefore what homework you need to do in order to inform a business plan. And I will leave it up to you as to exactly how pretty you want to make that business plan, how readable, how much time you want to spend writing it. I guess the only caveat I would throw into this as well is that if it's easy to get sloppy if you don't take the time to do the reading. To do the writing, okay? So I do actually encourage you in your copious spare time to at least write a very brief elevator pitch about each aspect that we're going to talk about, because in writing that down and making sure that what you're saying is actually verifiable by the information and the research you've developed, you will be challenging yourself to have done the correct research. If you're just kind of sloppy about it and say, okay, I've done the financial projections, but I haven't written a story about it yet, so I don't really know, you can fool yourself that you've done the research you need to, and then when you're trying to explain it to somebody else, you'll discover, you know what, actually I left out something kind of critical there, okay? So what I'm all about today in that case is to try and help you to ask the right questions, know what you have to deal with in terms of making the answers, and have a process, a system. So that leads into my next slide here, which is a little bit about me. You've already heard some about me, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I am a card-carrying scientist with a PhD in material science and engineering from Stanford and a BS in physics from MIT. I have had positions from research scientist to CEO of startup companies and up to vice president for new business development in more established companies. So I've had the great good fortune of being in everything from the smallest to the largest of corporations, and actually in government and nonprofits, as a board of director, a member of the board of directors, as well as being associate director for the Mass Tech Transfer Center for 5 years. By the way, for Massachusetts-based companies, which I think most of you are, the Mass Tech Transfer Center is another really terrific resource you should take advantage of. Drop me a line in the email if you'd like to know more. Okay. Also, I am a career entrepreneur, and I pause here only to emphasize this because I think it's easy to have too specific a definition of entrepreneur. To me, an entrepreneur is someone who is a member of an organization of any size who looks around and says, okay, how can I really add value to this organization, and how am I going to get the resources to make it happen? Okay, as long as you are doing those things, you can be an entrepreneur in a major corporation, a volunteer in a nonprofit, or a full-blown entrepreneur in a startup company. And most of all, what I'm here for is to help you guys to succeed. I love to coach, I love to work on pitching, and I love to introduce people who might be useful to each other. With a caveat, I'm often asked to introduce people to investors, and I don't have a broker's license, and I don't like the idea of the conflict of interest that can arise from that, and I certainly don't want to irritate any of my investor friends. So I don't make those specific kinds of introductions except at the request of the investor. But other than that, I'm always looking for how can these two startups exploit some synergies, or is there an attorney that you would be a good person for you to talk to for an hour, or that kind of a thing. So I am here to help you succeed in any way that is responsible. Okay. Alrighty, so enough about me, except to say that my tagline is life's a pitch, make yours amazing. Okay, and why do I say that other than the fact that I like puns? Well, it's because any time that you ask somebody to do something that they weren't already planning to do, you are pitching to them. A lot of people hate pitching. They feel like a used car salesman, or that they are, in some way, it's not real. It's all style and no substance. But if you think about it this way, this opportunity to help realize your vision by helping other people to see that vision, okay? Not that you are trying to get people to give you money. That may be in the long run what you're trying to get to, but the first thing you have to do is to captivate them with the vision that you have, okay? Because that's what makes them want to do it. Believing in you, believing in your vision is what makes the difference. So, for instance, there's all kinds of different pitches, as you can imagine, since I just said you're pitching all day long, right? So anytime you pitch, you must make an ask. In fact, I'll go over this again at the end of this presentation, but the 3 things I want you guys to do every single time you pitch from now till the end of your life is, number 1, introduce yourself. A pitch is more a conversation than a presentation, and introducing yourself changes that dynamic to a more personal one. Number 2, tell me why I should care. Number 3, make an ask, okay? So I'm going to just run through a few types of pitches here and what your asks actually are. So even when you're making an elevator pitch and asking for, I don't know, $5 million in investment or $50,000 or whatever, what you're really asking is, let me give you the more extended version of my pitch, okay? When you do that 10-minute pitch, your ask is, okay, I've got your enough attention, I've given you a little bit more validation for why it is that you should be excited about this, and helped you get some buy-in into the idea. The ask, again, even though it may be superficially money, it's really about how do we get that next meeting. Your executive summary, I love to have these. An executive summary is an awesome pitch. I want it to be no more than both sides of one page, and lots of graphics, not a lot of text, and your contact information. Please don't forget your contact information, because I will have to find you and slap you if I find out that you haven't done that. Anyway, the idea here is you want to have a leave behind that will allow the people you pitch to remember who you are, know how to contact you, and better yet, to be kind of a brand ambassador for you, right? Next time somebody comes in their office, they can say, hey, look at this. This was a really cool new company I heard about. You might want to check them out. Your website, you may not think about it this way, but your website is your most available pitch. It's there 24/7, and it is, and it should be designed around the concept that every page in there actually is a pitch. And so what your ask is usually, not always, but usually it's to an audience of a customer, and the ask is buy my products from me. And then finally, a business plan, as long as it is 25 or 30 pages, the ask is invest in me. But really, what these all have in common, no matter how different the medium or the specific ask is trust me. That's what we're trying to create. People invest in people that they know, like, and trust. And by delivering a pitch that you really believe in, that represents your vision, your integrity, your authority, you are giving them the opportunity to get to know you a little bit, to have an initial idea of whether they like you, and to get that all-important trust, okay? So I'm going to say, I probably will say this again because I often do, never lie, never mislead, because that gets in the way of this all-important trust me ask that you are making. All right, so I've sort of established here that I think a pitch is, a business plan is a pitch, but there's lots of different kinds of pitches. So what I really want you to get from this slide here is that a pitch and a business plan feed off of each other. The business plan is the content and the substance that support that beautiful, clean, clear story that you're telling with the pitch. Now, number one mistake that I see even the most experienced entrepreneurs make, and I have coached everybody from a sophomore at Hampshire College all the way through to someone who had recently raised $30 million. And I can tell you in each and every case, I run into this, well, each and every case is probably overstating it, but 90% of the time, the problem is that people talk about what they do, not why I should care about it. Even though the innovation is what is sexy and exciting about it, it is the overall value proposition that matters. And I'm going to beat up on investors a little bit here because it's kind of their fault, right? You run into them in a networking event and they say, so tell me what you do. And naturally, what you're going to do then is talk about what you do, right? That would make sense. But that's not what they mean. They mean, tell me why I should care about what you do. All right. So going forward, I'd really want you to be thinking about leading with that rather than leading with what you do. Okay. Now, fortunately, I have a very simple way for you to focus on why they should care. Okay, I got this from my work from my time at the Mass Tech Transfer Center, but it has been the most useful tool that I've ever come across. Okay. What I want you to do is have perfect pitch. And by that, I don't mean pitch perfectly because that's not feasible really. And also it is, it's not really practical, right? I don't want you to spend your time trying to achieve perfection. That's probably one of my biggest things that mean I work 80-hour weeks instead of 50-hour weeks. It's not the right thing to focus on. Instead, I want you to have perfect pitch, by which I mean I want you to tune your words for the ears of your specific audience. That's a really critical aspect that we're going to get to in a moment. I also don't want you to teach. You can do some teaching in your business plan because you've got the space to do it. In this initial pitch, though, you don't have time to teach anybody anything. All you can do is get them so excited about what you're doing that they can't wait to learn more, okay? I also don't want you to think that you have to tell them everything. If they feel like they have the whole story from talking to you for those 3 minutes or 10 minutes, then why are they going to bother having that follow-up meeting? It's important not to try to cram everything you've got into that initial pitch, okay? So what is this amazing approach? Well, it is human nature to want to talk about the things that excite us the most, right? And for most of us, it is that innovation. But it's also human nature to want to hear about the things that we find the most exciting. So since the audience has what you want, whether it's money or a referral or whatever, they win. You need to talk about what they care about rather than what you want to talk about. So how do you do that? All right. So here's my big key to doing this. The way to do it is to remember that investors are basically very simple creatures. They make up their minds based on just two things: fear and greed. All right. Now, if I'm going to be fair, we all make up our minds this way. It's just a matter of what we're fearful of and greedy for. So since I said in this initial pitch, you don't have time to teach anybody anything, all you can do is get them so excited about what you're doing that they can't wait to learn more. So everything you say should either reduce fear or increase greed, or preferably both, or it doesn't belong in that initial pitch. So if you don't get anything else out of today, that one message is the one that I want you to keep with you. Look at every script you ever write for a pitch and delete anything that does not either reduce fear or increase greed, or preferably both, okay? So the key aspect of this that I want to make sure that you also get is it matters who you're talking to, right? Fear and greed for an investor is going to be very different from fear and greed from a different kind of audience. So let's talk a little bit about different audiences. You know, the classic professional investors, the venture capitalists, angels, private equity firms, you know, fear and greed is to first order going to be about the financial bottom line. And it's important to recognize, especially for those of you who are in clean tech or in social industries, that even for triple bottom line investors, in the end, it's got to be about the financial bottom line, even if they're also concerned about social and environmental bottom lines. And the reason for that is that there are a lot of great ideas out there. Um, there are a lot of opportunities for them to invest in organizations that have wonderful world-saving kinds of capabilities. So if they have a choice between investing in a great idea that is going to be self-sustaining and have the ability to grow based on a great financial bottom line, and the one that is going to be struggling for capital every year of its existence, what is the smart place for them to put the money? The smart place is to put it in the one that is going to be able to support its own growth, because that's the one that is actually going to have the social and environmental impact over the long term that we all want. Okay? Now, I've got friends and family up here as well because they often would like to help. And in fact, I have gone down this path myself and will never do it again. My family is awesome and they've been incredibly supportive of me. But it's not, you know, it causes guilt and fear and worry and all kinds of other things. So I encourage you to find any other way you can to manage that. Even though it sounds like about a financial bottom, that it is a financial investment, it's really more focused on that investment of trust in you. I wish for all of you the opportunity to pitch to the general public at some point, whether it's because you have an initial public offering or you are part of an established public company after an acquisition. So an IPO or any kind of a stock sale is still a pitch, right? And for those of you who like non-dilutive funding, really, who doesn't like non-dilutive funding, funding agencies, anytime you write a grant proposal, that is also a pitch, and you will stand out from your competition for that grant funding if you focus on why they should care. Does the program manager care whether you make a lot of money? Probably to first order, not so much, but what they do care about is that that funding money is being used to further the goals of their organization, that they are looked on as a hero in their own organization, they get promotions or at least don't lose their job, things like that. What is it that they are fearful of and greedy for? Remember, it doesn't have to be about money. And that goes double when you're talking about yourself and your significant others. Trust me, if I wanted to be a millionaire, coaching early stage entrepreneurs is not the market niche that I should have picked. So my fear and greed is all about making a difference, and well, I would prefer not to be destitute as a retired person if I ever have the chance to retire. So those are kind of my fear and greed. Same thing for you. If you're putting everything you've got, blood, sweat, tears, next month's mortgage into making this this startup a success, then you have to lower your fear that you are going to fail and increase your greed that this vision is going to come to fruition. And if you have a significant other, you may very well be saying, you know, I'm sorry, I really can't come out this Saturday night again because I've got to run this experiment or write this software or whatever. You know, you have to trust in me because this will make a positive difference for us later in our relationship. You know, if you happen to be an entrepreneur and you have a project you really want to move forward with, your employer is your investor, and you have to be able to pitch to their fear and greed that investing some of their scarce budget into your project is worth it to them. And when you're hiring into your startup company, you have to lower their fear that they're picking the wrong startup and enhance their greed that this is really going to be a special experience for one reason or the other. But even with all of these different facets of audience, and maybe you have some different ones, it really all comes down to a single audience in the end, okay? The single most important audience you have is your customers, because if you cannot convince enough people to spend money on your products and services often enough, then you don't have a business and none of these other investors matter in the least, okay? So you're going to hear me refer to this kind of often as well. Customers, customers, customers. They're knowing who they are and what they care about is really what makes a difference for you. Holy cow, it is 12:25 already. I'm taking way too much time here. Okay, rock and roll. But you can tell I'm very passionate about this and I really want you guys to be successful. So I'm going to just take a quick look at the questions. If you guys want me to hurry up, then please just go ahead and write something into the question box. But in the meantime, I will try to keep running along here. I have until 1:30, so I can stick around that long if need be. Anyway, so concept, reduce fear, increase greed, preferably both. Very simple concept, right? Unfortunately, and in spite of the name of my company, Plano and Simple, simple is not the same thing as easy. So I'm sorry about this. I know how busy you already are and how you really don't need more work to do. But unfortunately, when you work with me, you find out that I'm giving you a system that I know works. I've done it over and over and over again, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be done tomorrow, okay? All right, with that caveat, let's get finally into the 4 steps to a pitchable plan. Okay, so number 1, I want you to evaluate your value proposition. Okay, I have these 10 questions that every pitch should answer, and that is the core to all of my coaching. It is what I use to pressure test every value proposition I come across, and I encourage you to use these, or if you prefer the business model canvas that is pretty popular, or some other approach, I don't care which, just make sure you're being systematic so you can cover all of the different aspects. Next, tackle any issues that you've identified in these answering the 10 questions for which you don't have adequate backup information. That's where you start having to do some real work in terms of researching the data behind it and developing materials that will allow you to support the assertions that you make when you pitch. In fact, another way to think about pitching is that you spend the whole time asserting some aspect of your value proposition and then backing it up, validating it with data as much as you can and with information where you don't have actual data. Oops. Third, I want you to clarify your story. I said earlier that I encourage you to actually make sure you write at least a 1-minute pitch in answer to each of these questions, because the process of writing makes you be more specific in terms of how you describe something. In fact, normally when I work with somebody, I spend 2 hours in a one-on-one coaching session with them where I listen to their pitch and then we go together through these 10 questions, sketching out the slides and coming up with the talking points. And if they want me to, they hire me to go and take those sketches and turn them into a professional deck. And it takes me frickin' forever because the details are where the rub is. So I take those sketches and I start drawing them out, sketching things out, and then refining those drawings, making animations and what have you to tell the story, and then I write the script to go with it. And it's very often in that process of making the drawings and animations and writing the script that I start to realize, I missed a detail here, or something doesn't make sense here. I cannot explain this to somebody else at this point, okay? So taking the time to do this sketching of both words and pictures is really critical. And then finally, oops, why do I keep going backwards? Because I guess it's going up on the screen. All right, there we go. Number 4, I want you to optimize those sketches and story for the audience and the medium that you're using. Keeping in mind you're going to be going back and forth between whatever version of pitch you're doing and the details and data that you have developed inside of that business plan, whether it's hidden from view or you hand it out on a regular basis. Okay, great. So let's start off then with evaluating your value proposition. And that is these 10 questions that every pitch should answer. So we don't have time, obviously, to go through all 10 of these in detail today. I will touch on a handful of them. The ones that I have seen are the most problematic. The ones that usually when I'm working with somebody, these are the most common ones that people have not done a good job of really thinking about. So to just go through all 10 really quickly, who cares is about the market size and the market pain, and that means knowing who your customer is. 2, what do you do in language that I can understand? That is your secret sauce and your innovation. And for the secret sauce, what you need to be clear on is, again, that you're not teaching, you're not giving people too much information, and that you're making it very clear what your secret sauce is. Please do not tell me that you can't tell me what your secret sauce is until you have a non-disclosure agreement. In 600 coaching sessions, I have never signed an NDA, and I promise you that if I don't, the investors are not going to do it either. You must learn how to talk about what's innovative and exciting about your company without giving away the candy store. And that's a topic for another day. 3, why will you win? And that is your competitive advantage. We'll talk more about that. 4, how will you stay ahead? This is your intellectual property, status and strategy. 5 is, does it work? This is your technology status and strategy. So your proof of concept, traction if you've got software or a beta of some kind, and so on. 6 is, how will you make money? This is your business model. Super critical, often not well explored. 7, how much will you make? That is your financial projections out through your liquidity event. If you don't know what a liquidity event is, I will be beating you up on that a little bit later today. 8, why you? That is the team. This is the management team, and it is mostly about your experience, not about your education. So when I started this presentation, I said, okay, so I've coached nearly 600 mostly high-tech entrepreneurs, and they've gone on to raise well over $250 million. Later on, I said, okay, PhD, Stanford, BS, MIT, woo, fancy pants education. And I'm sure that that doesn't hurt my credibility any, but if I dropped out of high school, would you really care? I mean, what's important here is that I know what I'm doing, right? So that's the kind of experience you want to pass along when you're doing a pitch about your team, okay? 9, what will you do if I invest money in you or whatever other resource you're looking for? So that's your development plan. And how much will it cost? That's your ask. And the ask is often there. I'm not saying I often see it done well or that it is really complete. So it's actually very tightly tied to the development plan, obviously. So we're actually going to talk about both of those in a little bit. Okay, so next we're going to talk about research. Let me just check any questions about doing the first one, the 10 questions. No, okay. So, like I said, these are the 10 questions, and we're going to spend a little bit of time right now talking about what to do and what not to do, how to think about fear and greed when you're answering each of these, okay? So, who cares? So this is a kind of a joke picture here, because I promise you when you go to pitch to investors, they will not be that young. And I can doubly guarantee you there will not be two women and one man. I'm sorry to say, maybe someday in the future. But what I want you to pay attention to is the folded arms here, okay? That is the attitude that even if they don't look like this, that's what's going on in their head. Remember, they have professional investors that have invested their money into their funds, into the VC's funds, and therefore they are taking a risk. They have fear and greed associated with keeping those investors happy as well. If they decide to invest in you, they are risking their reputation among their peers. They are risking that you won't make your taking the risk that you won't make your numbers, and therefore you're going to be a drag on the return on investment that they can promise and deliver. And if they give you money, that means that they don't have more money available to give to the next Google that happens to walk in their door the day after they sign a term sheet with you. So it's really much safer and to some extent in their best interest to say no. Your job is to make it in their best interest to say yes, to allay those fears that I have just gone through, okay? So how are we going to do that? First and foremost is to address this issue of the market size and the market pain. And the big fear here is that the investor will hear what you're saying about why this is a big problem, but in their minds it's going to be, okay, so their mom and a couple of their best friends might buy from them, but that's it. And on the greed side of things, holy crap, I want 5 of these, and I don't actually go swimming, so I don't I don't need this fancy new app or whatever it is, but I can't wait to start just because I'm so excited about this technology. I understand the pain and why what you're doing is important. Everybody's going to want this sucker. Now, you're not going to be at either of these extremes more than likely, or you wouldn't have started the company, but just as as an approach, I want you to be thinking about reducing that fear and enhancing that greed. Best way to do these things, number one, define who your customer is. I want you to make phone calls. I'd prefer it if you actually showed up. And when you talk to customers, here's another thing that's super critical. Nobody likes to tell anyone, least of all an enthusiastic and passionate entrepreneur. They don't want to tell you no about anything. So if you walk to a customer, potential customer, and say, we have this awesome innovation that's going to do X, Y, and Z. Would you like to buy that? 99% of the time, unless they are real curmudgeons, are going to say, oh yeah, absolutely. And I could tell you a very sad story about that from my first startup when I was doing thin films of diamond, but we don't really have time for that right now. But basically, I learned the lesson very hard way that until people are spending money on stuff, it's very hard to trust what they say they will do. So rather than telling them, ooh, look at this cool thing we have, I want you to be thinking about avoiding what you're doing altogether and saying, hey, tell me about your problems. What are the issues that you have in achieving X, Y, and Z? Okay, make them talk to you about their issues, and then you can decide what is right about your current innovation and what do you need to do to adapt it to the reality of the situation. Also, I don't want you to talk to 1 or 2 customers. I would, ideally, if you follow the I-Core program that is also based on the business model Canvas, you would call 100 customers, because that's the kind of volume that it takes to really get at what the issues are. Up until then, you've got kind of a selection bias. It takes a lot of time and effort, but the time and effort that it saves you in the long term, I think, is well worth it. Okay, next thing is I want you to develop the market from the bottom up, not from the top down. In other words, I don't want you to go out and pick up some market study from Forrester or somebody that says, hey, you've got $1 billion market for this. It may be true. The analysts at these market analysis firms are brilliant. I know several of them, and I think they're amazing people, but they're also in the business of developing reports that talk about billion-dollar markets. And it may have very, very little to do with the market segmentation that you have, your early adopter segments and all of that kind of thing. You can, by all means, read them. There's often awesome market research in them if you can get your hands on one you can afford. but usually they're kind of out of date by the time they're affordable, so that's too bad. But spend some time on the analyst websites, because you can often get your hands on at least a little bit of useful market information. But really what you need to do is to develop that market from the bottom up by saying, okay, I know who my customers are because I have interviewed them. I know how much they are paying right now to deal with the problem that I am solving. So let's multiply those numbers together, and that gives me a first order analysis of what the market is that will have infinitely more value to you when pitching to an investor than the best market study out there. Hold on. Whew, sorry about that. Okay, so by all means, take a look at it. Use the market analysis, the market study, as a kind of a top level reality check, but make sure that you know your market from your customer's perspective. And the other piece of advice, I'll try to get really quickly because yes, great, got to keep moving, is that some people find that it feels better to say, yeah, we only need to get 10% of this market in order to be successful. And I think that that sounds super conservative and appealing to investors. It does not, for a couple of reasons. One is that people have a tendency to go into crazy markets when they do this. Like, we're going to sell into China because they have over 1 billion people there, and our product is $100 each. So all we need is 1% market penetration, and we'll all be rich. It's going to be great. And then, of course, the questions come like, so what do you know about doing business in China? Do you know how to distribute there, service things? How's your Chinese? And do your customers make $100 in an hour or in a year? Does this make any sense at all to go into this market? And I'm exaggerating by talking about China. It could be I'm going into diabetes or something like that. It just doesn't make any sense. It's not your market segment. The other issue with it is if I'm an investor and I'm going after a company that I want to make 10 to 15 times return on my money on, am I going after a company that's looking at 10% market share? I don't think so. Obviously you're not going to get to a huge market share in the time frame, more than likely in the time frame that that you want to exit in. But if you don't think you have something that's good enough that should allow you, to the best of your knowledge now, that should allow you to be able to get to 80% of the market, why do you think you're going to win? Okay, people hate to change what they're doing. They would much rather complain about what their solutions are today than to have to change their behavior and spend money on it. So if you think only 10% is what, or 1% worse, is what you can get, then that's not conservative at all. That's really fear-inducing. Okay, so I'm not saying I want you to go out there and pitch, oh yes, and we're getting 80% of the market, because that's not short-term realistic either. But please stay away from this kind of, we're being very conservative mindset, because it's not going to get you anywhere, I promise. All right, I'll skip down to question number 3. Why will you win? This is your competitive advantage. And the fear and greed that we're working on here is to make sure they understand that you are offering what is truly a better solution, something that the customers are really going to care about. Lower the fear that this is the same company that they've seen 3 times in the last 6 weeks, and enhance the greed that, wow, this is something truly novel, and I want to get on board with this before the next copycats come along. So the way to do this, the best way I know to do this, is to focus on benefits, not features. And the way I like to think about this is to say that if you walk into a dark room and you flip the light switch, do you care whether the light comes on or what the mechanism is behind the switch plate? Obviously, people care about the light coming on. So what are the 4 or 5 lights that you turn on better, brighter, cheaper for your customers than anybody else does? All right. doesn't have to be more than that. It's okay if there's some aspect that is very similar to others, but you've got to find those 4 or 5 that really make a difference in terms of the lights you're turning on, not the mechanism behind the switch plate. Make sure that you are thinking in terms of not only the direct competition, other startups, other direct competition, but also the all-important business as usual case. What it is that people are doing today, because you've got to get them to change their behavior. And like I said, that's really challenging. Worst thing you can do is say, I got no competition. Okay, first of all, there's only 3 options here. First of all, you could be right, and in a capitalist society, then chances are if you've got no competition, you also have no market. So you are planning to develop an entire market, which is not a trivial thing to do. And I can tell you some stories about that, but again, we don't really have time right now. Second, you are wrong that you have no competition and you're just too lazy to have done your homework. So that doesn't make me feel very good as a potential investor either. Number 3, you're wrong and you're just sufficiently arrogant that you actually do think you are the smartest person on the planet. So, and no investor, nobody wants to get married to somebody who's that arrogant. You have to have a lot of really redeeming qualities to make that kind of a marriage worthwhile. So, you should be wrong about having no competition, and even if you are convinced that you're not, please don't be so arrogant about it that you think you know everything, okay? And make sure that you're keeping things simple and clear. And when we get to the 3rd step of sketching what your advantage is, I'll get into a little bit more about how to avoid that being overly detailed and complex. Question 6, how will you make money? This is your business model, as you can plainly read. And the issue here is, is that you think that once you make whatever it is that you've got, whatever app it is and so on, that people will just see it and flock to your door. The old, if you build a better mousetrap, people will be a path to your door. Yeah, just doesn't happen. Probably wasn't even true when mousetraps first came about. So what we're trying to get at here is to make sure that when you are pitching, or rather even developing your business plan on this, that you have really taken the time to understand how business works in your particular industry, and that, better yet, other people have been successful with it. So the way to do something about this is to take advantage of the work you did in answering questions 1 and 3. Know who your customer is, and therefore know who your competition is with respect to your specific products and services. They will show you, if you take the time to really work on it, they will show you what to do and what to avoid doing. So when you show your own business model, you can validate it with, here's what's succeeded and here's where we're doing things better than anybody else. It's usually not the best place to innovate. If your business model actually is your innovation, then you don't really have a choice. But for the most part, for the first 5 questions, we're talking about increasing greed more than reducing fear. And for the second 5, we're talking more about reducing fear than enhancing greed. So I prefer it if you kept the innovation level pretty low on the business model, unless it is your innovation. Okay. The other thing is to make sure that you are covering the whole business model. I usually like to draw this out as a flow chart from my suppliers, in which, if I'm doing software, maybe software as a service or something, my suppliers are maybe the server farms that I'm holding things on if I don't plan to do that in-house, that kind of thing. It includes distribution, and it includes your decision makers, it includes your end users. You need to know who each of these people are. You need to know especially who the decision maker is. The decision maker is the person that signs the check, and that is your real customer. They will be influenced by the end user, but they are not necessarily going to be convinced by the same things. And let's take a quick look there. My quick story on this, then, or illustration, I guess. And let's say you're best friends with Michael J. Fox, who has just come back from the future with his hoverboard, skateboard kind of a thing, and he wants you to take it and commercialize it for him. So Your end user is 13-year-old boys who want to scare the snot out of their parents, and your decision maker is probably exactly those same parents, because you're going to charge like $500 for this thing, right? At least. So your pitch to the 13-year-old boys and girls is going to be something along the lines of, look what you can do, all this cool stuff, and you're going to, on a plus side, you're going to scare the snot out of your parents. That probably won't be effective with the parents. So with the parents, what you need to be doing is saying, hey, by investing in this board for your kids, they are going to learn to understand, they're going to understand on a visceral level hovercraft physics better than all of their peers. And so they're going to get into a really great college as a result, right? That might encourage them to be willing to part with $500 to watch their kids crack their heads open. So you get the general drift anyway. Sorry, a little punchy there. But that does highlight another thing. How are you going to reach those 13-year-old kids? How are you going to reach those parents? You're going to have separate ways of getting to them as well, because you're delivering exactly the same, using one channel to deliver opposing messages to different types of people. It's going to be very difficult to get the correct message to the right people. Okay, so the thing that I most often see people failing on is not understanding that there is a cost associated with customer acquisition. Who are the customers? Who are the decision makers? Who are the end users? How are you going to reach them? And how much is it going to cost? But you also need to know if you're making something physical, are you making it in-house or outsourcing it? Are you having an internal sales force, or are you using distributors? And in that case, who's managing the relationship with the distributors, et cetera, and so on. That's why I like that whole flow chart idea. This is, by the way, about, oops, sorry guys. This is about how your business is going to work while you are making the millions and millions of dollars, okay? Not how you're holding body and soul together right now as an early stage startup. So make sure that you are not including your development plans. And the worst pitch I ever coached was one that I gave when I was CEO of the software company. Very upsetting to learn all of these lessons in first person. So please learn from me, don't make the same mistakes. Trying to include all of the custom work and the other little things that you might be doing that won't amount to a lot of revenue once you're making a big scalable business is only going to muddy the waters. So make sure you're just talking about how this thing of beauty is going to work when the company is successful and growing, okay? And as with everything else, you can be detailed in your business plan if you must, but please don't do it in any of your pitches. You just want to put out enough information there to be intriguing and interesting and make them ask you a question so you can have a discussion, a conversation, and start building that relationship. Okay, and finally, so question 9, what will you do? I said this is the one that tends to not get done very well. But it's also so tightly coupled with how much will it cost that I want to cover both of those for you guys. The other way I like to think about this, and this is kind of long for the Plano and Simple approach, but bear with me. So how much time and how much money is it going to take to get to what value-added milestones on the way to my return on investment? Right? Because what the investor really cares about is, how am I going to get my money back here? Do I believe it's possible that I'm going to make my numbers? So that means you have to understand an exit. And I have actually had people tell me, oh, my exit is that I'm just going to leave the company. Like, no. It's not your personal exit. It is when the investor can sell stock in your company, which normally only happens through an IPO or an acquisition. Okay, and very often the way people will pitch this is to say, well, we'll either do an IPO or an acquisition. And my feeling is, well, duh, what are the other real options here? If I'm going to give you tens of thousands or millions of dollars, then I need to feel pretty confident that you know where you're going. And while I don't expect you to have a crystal ball, I don't expect that your financials will be accurate or precise. I don't think that you're going to be correct about the timing and not even necessarily the type of exit. What I do need to know is that you have done your homework, you understand how businesses usually exit in this field, you know who tends to buy them, and at what stage of the company, so that you can pitch a scenario that is plausible and show that you are focused like a laser on getting there. And once, with the understanding that this is the best you can do with the knowledge that is at hand, and as the circumstances change, you will change what you are doing and saying, right? Because I promise you that if you say 5 years from now we anticipate being acquired by Microsoft, and instead in 4 years you have a public offering, nobody is going to come to you and say, hey, you said you were going to get acquired by Microsoft in 5 years, or even if it's 6 years by Apple, let's say. They're not going to come back and say, well, you said back in 2015 that you were going to get acquired by this company, because it's obvious that you are pitching the best to your knowledge today. As things change and your board of directors will help you choose, you will go the way that makes the most sense at the time. But make sure that you sound like you know where you're going and what you want to accomplish, not so much because you want to be completely accurate in what that story is, but rather because you need to demonstrate that you are a smart business person. So I want you to make sure you are able to describe your plan right through current development, from your current stage of development all the way through your liquidity event. Don't forget to make your ask. Remember what I said, you always, always, always make an ask with your pitch. No other reason to make a pitch, frankly. And this is not just about technology development, right? I don't want to hear that you're going to launch a beta, you can do wireframes and then a beta, and then you're going to do a soft launch and then a full launch. Based on just what technology steps must be achieved. They've got to be about what makes the company intrinsically more valuable, and that means intrinsically lower risk. And I'll show you an example of what I mean in just a moment. Just checking for any questions. Okay, we're still good. Okay, so finally, not finally, actually, we're only on number 3, clarify your story, which is about sketching. And I'm just going to take you through my favorite ways of showing, let's see, is it all 3 of these? No, 2 of the 4 questions that we've been dealing with, right? So I had number 1 was who cares, and that was about the market size. I will usually use pie charts or bar graphs for that. 3 is why are you better? That's competition template, which is what this one is, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The 3rd one that people often fail to really do a good job on is their business plan. I usually use a flow chart for that. And then finally, the development plan. I'll show you what I use for that. Okay, so hold on to your hats here. Now, I know you have all seen this matrix a million times before, and you're probably sick of it. Me too, believe me, 600 times, you get sick of anything you do every single time. However, I have tried doing, making final pitches that do not show a matrix in it, and I've had people come up to me afterwards and say, but where was the competition slide? You always yelled at me. And even the investors in the audience saying, well, I didn't get the competition. So these things get to be trite for a reason. It's because they're really effective. But if you decide there is a better way to show this, that's totally fine with me, but I'm still going to encourage you to go through the exercise of laying out this matrix, because I have found it absolutely invaluable in telling the story of the competition and informing whatever graphic or words you use to describe your competition. Okay, so if you do use this as an actual slide, I would suggest using the format I'm showing here, not the colors or anything, but rather I want the companies in the first, or the technologies in the first column. I want you at the top, because psychologically we want to show that you are number 1. Make sure that you are covering all the different types of competition, the business as usual, direct, indirect, and any other startups that have gotten a lot of buzz or that you're aware of and concerned about. I want you to find those 4 or 5 lights that you are turning on. Remember, if you walk into a dark room, what do you care about when you switch that light switch? It's whether the light comes on or not what the mechanism is behind the switch plate. So I don't want to see that, this is a, you're using a, oh golly. Yeah, I don't want to hear that you're using Ruby on Rails, if that's even a really good current platform for a SaaS application or something like that. I don't want to hear that that it is a state-of-the-art medical device material, things like that. Those are technical features. What I care about is that the platform is robust and reliable. I care about that that the medical device is going to you can sterilize it. You know, that's the light that I'm turning on, and I know what those are very, very well if I've done my homework and interviewed the customers. Okay. All right. So no more than 4 or 5. Be kind to your audience. They only have, 40 to 80 or 90 seconds to absorb each new slide that you're throwing up there. So if you try to cram in every piece of information, there's no way they can absorb it. Remember, you don't need to or want to tell them everything. You just want them to have enough that they're interested enough to ask you questions. If you have an hour with an investor, if you're lucky enough to get that, and you speak for 15 minutes and they talk for 45, that is a huge friggin' major win. Record the conversation if you can so you don't miss anything. Listen, listen, listen. Encourage them to ask questions. When you give them answers, keep your answers as short as humanly possible. You're not there to give detail. You are there to get the next meeting. Okay, enough nagging. All right, so frame the benefits such that you can use some kind of an icon. It doesn't have to be checks and X's. I don't really care what you use, but I'd prefer you didn't use words. I prefer you didn't use numbers, and I especially don't want you to use ranges of numbers because that makes it almost impossible for anyone to glance at it and get what you're talking about. Don't make them work. Allow them to glance at the slide, get an idea of what you're about to talk about, and then focus on you. Listen to you, let you tell the story because you are what's important. They're investing in you far more than they are investing in the technology. Okay. So keep it very simple, keep it easily highlighted. You don't have to have a perfect set of only checks for you and only X's for them. Don't put anything up here for which you have an X or for which everybody else has a check. May be true, that's totally fine, but that's not the purpose of this particular part of the pitch. We're here to talk about what's important to the investor, where you have a competitive advantage that matters, okay? And the way I would tell the story for something like this is not to go, we're better at benefit one because of this, and they're worse because of that, and they're worse because of this other thing. Instead, tell the story. So for instance, on this one, we would say that for this combination of the 4 benefits that our customers really care about, we are the only one that supplies the solution that meets all of them. Now, we do have some competition for benefit number 3 from the business as usual and emerging competition, and benefit 2, there's a direct competitor that has an advantage as well, but everywhere else and in that combination, we are unique. Okay, and then having told that story, you are now in a position to create a competition slide that reflects that, however you want to do it, even if it's not a matrix. All right, now for questions 9 and 10, this is my favorite way to do it. This is a very modified Gantt chart that has the nice feature to it that it goes up from left to right because investors like things that go up from left to right. I'm really running short on time here, so I apologize for that, and I'm going to just kind of race through this and just say that the arrows represent the different rounds of investment, the diamond represents the exit, the liquidity event, and the bullets are the value-added milestones that you need. So for instance, to pitch this, I might say that, okay, we're looking for a total of $21 million in order to be acquired by we're anticipating being acquired by Microsoft at the end of 5 years. They have a history of making acquisitions of similar companies that have reached break even and have a core number of really high value customers signed at that point. But right now we're looking for $1 million. That will allow us to complete our initial demo and file these 2 new patents that are essential for the long-term acquisition opportunities, and then we'll be needing to raise another $5 million for the subsequent 2 years to achieve regulatory compliance, hire a VP of sales and marketing with an extensive industry Rolodex, and get that all critical first customer signed. Okay, so again, telling the story. You can also use this when you're doing a grant proposal. So this is for like $2 million and maybe it's a 3-year proposal. So here's what you're going to achieve. And the delivery at the end of the 3rd year is for your final report and an application for a phase 2. Or let's say you're just talking to a customer, then the time frame might change. You'll see down here we're talking about quarters or months or weeks, whatever is appropriate to what you're doing. Lay it out. Their return on investment is not financial necessarily in this case, depending on what you're selling. Their return on investment comes when they receive the final product and they can start using it and making wonderful things happen for their own company. But if you lay it out this way so they can see what their money is buying, the value-added milestones they are buying, so that they can feel confident that you are selling them something specific, that they can tell whether or not it's working as we go along. Okay, so just to kind of summarize here, so question 1 on who cares, the resources you can take advantage of to do the research you need is to call your customers, lots of them, and do that bottoms-up market estimate. Why will you win? I want you to, again, call lots of your customers. Try calling your competition if you can find a way to get in, or at least do an analysis of them through available literature or their annual reports. Make sure that you do a competition matrix that's really robust and focuses on the lights you're turning on for the competition. Go out there and for the business model, how will you make money? Take that analysis of your competition and put it to good use in showing that you know how business works in your industry, and absolutely know how you're going to get your path to and your cost of the customer acquisition. And finally, for question 9, what will you do? Know what your exit should be if you're going to be consistent within your industry. And I didn't really cover this, but this is absolutely core. This goes back to question 0, who is your audience? Make sure you're pitching to people who are interested in what you're doing. That means if you're pitching to an investor, that it is someone who is interested in your stage of company, that needs your level of money with an exit in your time frame, and that they haven't already invested in a competitor, because if they invested in a competitor, they will never ever invest in you, right? Hoo-ha. Okay. So finally, optimize your message for the audience and the medium, and that is where you are going to go back and forth between the pitch and the business plan, as we've just described it. So your business plan is this incredibly complex, interactive, interacting, and evolving ecosystem, if I can use that term, that is impossible to describe in detail, okay, for a pitch. What I want you to do is to pull out the top level 10 things for your 10-minute pitch, okay? 1 minute on each of these 10 questions. A little bit less actually, because I also want you to start with a 30 to 60 second elevator pitch. Once you have that 10-minute pitch written, you can take the top 3 to 5 kinds of answers for which you have questions for which you have the most robust answers, and create your 30 to 60 second elevator pitch and your 3-minute cocktail party pitch. You can also take some subset and lay out that that 1 page, 2 sides of 1 page executive summary. It's not about putting all the information in. It is about putting your contact information. Please don't leave that out. But it's not about being thorough. It's about giving them a reason to call you back. And don't forget about your website. Thinking about who the investor is on your website, probably a customer. What are you pitching to them, and what aspect of your business do you want to pitch on each page? You can only pitch really well for one ask to one audience at a time, okay? So really think about that when you do your website. And as you write those pitches, especially the 10-minute pitch, make sure you take the information as it develops and you realize what holes you've got. Make sure that it goes back and informs your overall business plan. Okay. All right, and I'm just going to wrap up now with these 3 aspects of your of every pitch. Introduce yourself. Jon Stewart, well, I guess not anymore. Trevor, what's his name, introduces himself every night when he starts the Daily Show or whatever your favorite newscaster is. They always introduce themselves, not because we don't know who they are, but because they want to change the experience of the relationship. Even though they're talking over a medium, they want you to feel like they're talking to you. Don't forget, make an ask. And in between, whether you're talking for 30 seconds or 2 hours, I want you to tell me why I should care, not what you do, why I should care about it. If you only have 30 seconds, make sure you capture their imagination. The more time you have, you can get more into validating the opportunity and helping them to achieve buy-in. And that's what those 10 questions do for you, okay? All right, my special offer to those of you who are still here is I will do a free half-hour pitch consult. You can sign up at this bit.ly address. POM actually stands for Pitch-O-Matic. My website developers are not quite done with my Pitch-O-Matic, so we're just going to skip that part. If you're interested, I'm happy to listen to either your elevator pitch or your 10-minute pitch and give you some feedback on it at no charge for 30 minutes. Just sign up at POM Consult or send me an email. I'm going to leave that up for a few seconds and let's just see if anybody has their hand up. Or I don't see any specific questions. So either I'm talking a whole lot too fast or I've been incredibly mind-bogglingly clear. Let's hope it's the latter. All right, if nobody's got a question, does anybody want to try out their 1-minute elevator pitch? I will give you some free coaching right now. Okay, Mark, I am going to, oh, actually, Mark, before I unmute you, I did get a question from Amandio. Oh, you got the hand. All right. Oh, okay, great. This is the first time I've used a handout. Yeah, the handout is not exactly the same as what I just went through, and there's a couple of reasons for that. It's the essentials that are in there. I will also make this recording available for a week or so, and it will be available behind the paywall at the MIT Enterprise Forum. But this is also my intellectual property. And I would like you to call me and to visit my website to get all of this information. So I'm not going to give up all of the information, so the entire slide deck. So sorry about that, but that's my approach. And if somebody talks me out of it someday, then we'll go with that. Okay, all that said, Mark, you are unmuted. Do you want to give me your 1-minute pitch?
Sure. Hi, I'm Mark Steinwinter. I'm a founder of lifeity.com. When we die or become incapacitated, it falls to our loved ones to manage our affairs, but most of us are not ready for that. Lifeity is a highly secure web application for people over 50 to step through recording the details of their everyday life. Lifeity reminds you about routine items like bills and online passwords, and the location of important documents, so managing your life becomes easier. Using Lifeity, you can securely share and discuss that information with your loved ones online, so they will be ready for a smooth handoff. With Lifeity, you and your loved ones enjoy peace of mind, knowing that they are prepared to easily fulfill your wishes and manage your affairs when you are no longer able.
Okay, excellent. So you are, the sound wasn't perfect there, but I think I heard most of that. And so first let me say congratulations on making sure that you cover that you introduced yourself, you made the ask, and you did focus on parts of why I should care. But the question I should have asked you first is, who is your audience? Who is this pitch for?
The pitch is, well, assuming I'm not talking to investors, well, I guess I am talking to investors. Yes.
Okay,
well,
you're talking to customer type investors or to professional investors who want to make their 10 to 15 times return?
No, this pitch is to the customer. It's to a baby boomer who either has an aging parent or who is part of a couple in a typical household where one person knows most of what's going on in the household's business and the other is largely in the dark.
Great. Okay. So let me ask the people who are still online. I'm going to lower your hand, Mark. Everybody who knows why they should care, would you please raise your hand? Okay, I don't know if this shows on your screen, but we're not getting anybody to raise their hand on this, which is really, really interesting because I thought it was reasonably clear. It may be an audio issue more than anything else. But I would say that the comment that I made to myself while you were pitching was that, yeah, I get that this is an interesting service, but I don't know that it's going to save me money, and I don't even know that it's going to save me time. It might save me some heartache and some confusion, but is it going to be in a way that makes my life actually simpler? And it doesn't do it cost effectively. So even though you're not pitching to me as somebody who's going to give you money instantly anyway, I would definitely take the time to say a lot. I might start off with, as you did, we've got a baby boomer generation that is retiring very quickly, and of course, as time goes on, we will lose our parents, our friends, and so on. And one of the most difficult aspects of that is to have to deal with the loose ends that are left behind. It's hard enough to deal with having lost a person, but now you're also having to clean up their electronics and their bank accounts and so on. We want to take the pain away from you for that. And to do so, we've come up with an app that will keep track of these things simply, and for I don't know, for $5 a month, whatever the subscription is, so that when the time comes, you don't have to worry about it anymore. You can just take care of your family and think about your loved one. Something like that. That's not the most elegant I've ever done on that, so sorry about that, but you get the general idea, right? That I'm looking for something that is much clearer in terms of what it is that the benefit is, right? Okay?
Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. I'm going to mute you up again. And actually, I forgot, I do have a couple of polls for you guys that I'd really appreciate if you just take a moment here. First one I think I will do is well, let's start with this one. Would you please vote on this and let me know whether this webinar was helpful to you? Okay, just waiting for a couple more people. Okay. If you're very nice, getting very high yeses. So if you're holding back because you don't want to say anything mean, that's okay. I can take it. I just really want to make sure that we make these Ask a Pro webinars useful as possible. So if I could get just a few more votes in, that would be great. Okay, I'm going to close it at that because we don't want to spend much more time on this. And the other poll, I'm not sure if that's showing on your screen or not, 86% said that yes, it was helpful. So, and I didn't get any really negatives, just somebody thought it was just a little helpful. So sorry about that. We'll try to give you something more exciting next time. Okay, I am interested in knowing what topics you are really excited about hearing more about in the future. Now, I know this is just a multiple choice, so you're only going to get to tell me the one. Oops. So we'll give you other chances going forward, but looking forward to seeing this one. Oh, you guys are killing me here. Okay, okay. No, we do have a clear winner here. Okay. Okay, I'm just trying to make sure. Let me share that. Here we go. Yeah. Okay, guys. So negotiations is very high. So I may be looking into doing that. We have webinars established for the next through September, as you may have seen at the beginning. But intellectual property is in process, and so is the team one. Interesting that negotiations is so high. So maybe we'll move negotiations to one of the October webinars. So thank you very, very much for your input on this. And while we're at it, let me just put this here so that you can see what's coming up while I continue to talk. Okay, would anybody else care to try out their 1-minute pitch? Or have any other questions whatsoever? Okay, well, that is awesome. I want to thank you guys so very, very much for signing up for the relaunch of the Ask a Pro webinar series. I'm very much looking forward to our next one, which is on September 10th with the redoubtable Graham Brooks, who's a partner at 406 Ventures. He's going to give his presentation on his perspective as a venture capitalist on how to get funded. And I'm also very excited about Robert Belt, who is a longtime colleague of mine since like 1994. He has been doing business development for his entire career. He's very smart and he's very funny, and he knows how to get in front of the right person, the decision maker in any in virtually any kind of a company in order to make sure you're pitching to the right people. Okay, I've got a write-in here, by the way. Thanks, Mark, for, why is it so hard to open up? There we go. Also interested in getting more about angel funding versus venture capital. We actually are planning on getting there. I don't want to hit on all funding right away because there's so many other aspects of entrepreneurship that are critical. But yeah, we plan on having angel funding as well. Talked about versus VC. We may do something on crowdfunding and so on. So we are here to help. Keep those great suggestions coming. So to register to hear about Graham, oh, I just realized I haven't updated the actual description of the webinar. So if it comes back to you saying that you know, this is about a speaker talking about topic, don't worry about it. It's all actually said. I've seen the presentation. It's great. So sorry about that if that problem is in there. And just to be really clear here, because it may not show up on your screen, this is bit.ly/about MITEF AAP for Ask a Pro _002. If that doesn't work for you, then just use the Ask a Pro sign up. Capitalization matters very much for Bitly, so please do take advantage of that. And you know, you can do me a really enormous favor as well, or do a real favor to the program if, when you actually do sign up, oh, there's Graham Brooks, isn't that awesome? His wife drew that. When you register here, if you click on this box, you will get onto the mailing list. And even more important, if you wouldn't mind sharing this with your Twitter account or your Facebook or Google Plus, whatever, it'd be really great, because that is a wonderful way for us to attract more entrepreneurs to this program so that lots of people get the benefit and we get more input and conversation going. Okay, same thing, even if you use the simpler one, you can still make sure, oh, I'm sorry, this is the sign up for the Ask a Pro webinar mailing list. Okay, still, please, by all means, use the social media stuff, okay? And so just going back to, whoopsie daisy, where are we? So there's the Palm Consult one to get the half hour with me. There is how to register for Graham and to get onto the Ask a Pro sign up. So thank you ever so much again. You guys totally rock. Let me do one last check for questions, suggestions, and I see absolutely nothing. So we are coming up on 1:30. So I will take this time to say thank you again and have a fabulous rest of the day. And I will talk to you in 2 weeks, I hope. Bye-bye, everybody.